There is a belief so widespread that almost nobody questions it, that babies don't remember anything. That the first years of life are a kind of blank slate, vivid and real in the moment, but gone by the time the child can talk. That what happens before language doesn't really stick. It is one of the most consequential myths in the history of developmental science, and the research dismantling it has been accumulating for over 4 decades. Your baby is not failing to form memories. They are forming a specific kind of memory, stored in a part of the brain that never goes away, in a format that language cannot reach and cannot erase. And the moments being encoded right now are exactly the ones most parents think don't count yet. In 1985, developmental psychiatrist Daniel Stern at Cornell University Medical College published a book called The Interpersonal World of the Infant. It changed the field. Stern argued that infants were not passive recipients of care, not blank slates waiting for language to arrive before real experience could begin. They were active, meaning-making beings from the very first days of life, constructing a model of the world from every interaction, every sensation, every moment of connection or disconnection. And crucially, he argued, the memories being formed in that window were not the kind that faded. They were the kind that became the operating system. What follows are 4 specific moments that developmental neuroscience has identified as particularly formative. 4 categories of experience that leave lasting traces in the infant brain. Not as stories the child will one day tell, but as something deeper and harder to reach than any story. The body's own record of what it learned about safety, about love, and about what to expect from the world. Moment 1. The sound of your voice before I was born. Most people know that babies can hear inside the womb. What most people don't know is what that hearing is actually doing to the developing brain. In 1980, psychologists Anthony DeCasper and William Pfeiffer at the University of North Carolina ran an experiment that should have made headlines everywhere and mostly didn't. They tested newborns, babies just hours old, using a specially designed pacifier that allowed infants to adjust the rate of a recording by changing their sucking pattern. Faster sucking produced one recording. Slower sucking produced another. And the newborns, within minutes, reliably adjusted their sucking to activate the recording of their own mother's voice over the voice of a stranger. Hours old. They had a preference. They had already learned something. In a follow-up study in 1986, DeCasper and Melanie Spence asked pregnant women to read the same short passage aloud twice a day for the last 6 weeks of pregnancy. After birth, the newborns were tested. They showed a measurable preference for that specific passage over a different one their mother had never read. They recognized it, not the meaning. Not the words. The acoustic pattern, the rhythm, the cadence, the particular shape of a voice reading a particular thing, encoded across 6 weeks of prenatal exposure. What this means is that your baby's first memory of you did not begin at birth. It began somewhere around the 6th month of pregnancy, when the auditory system became functional enough to process and store sound. You were already familiar before they ever saw your face. Your voice was already the sound of safety before they had any other reference point for what safety meant. And that memory doesn't sit in a place the baby can access consciously. It sits in the brain's auditory cortex and limbic system, as something more primal than recognition. It is the reason a newborn stops crying the instant they hear their parent's voice, and not a stranger's. The first time, every time. Even before anyone has done anything to earn that response. You didn't start building that relationship in the delivery room. You built it in the months before. Word by word, conversation by conversation, through walls of skin and fluid, into a brain that was already listening. Moment 2. The first time you held me against your skin. In the first minutes after birth, something happens that most hospitals now actively protect, and that for most of human history happened without anyone needing to be told. The baby is placed on the parent's chest, skin to skin, and the response in the infant's body is immediate and measurable. Heart rate stabilizes, breathing regulates, cortisol drops. Core body temperature, which plummets in the first minutes outside the womb, recovers within 20 minutes of skin-to-skin contact at a rate that no incubator replicates. But the research that most people haven't heard about goes well beyond the immediate physiology. In 1975, psychologist Aidan McFarlane at Oxford ran a deceptively simple experiment. He placed 2 breast pads beside the faces of 6-day-old infants, one from their own mother and one from an unfamiliar nursing mother. The babies turned toward their mother's pad, not sometimes, consistently, reliably, at a rate far above chance, 6 days old. They knew. They had already stored in the olfactory system the specific chemical signature of the person who held them first, and they were using that information to orient themselves in the world. Researcher Benoist Schall at the University of Burgundy spent decades mapping olfactory memory in infants and found that the encoding happens with a speed and permanence that no other sensory system matches. Smell bypasses the thalamus entirely and routes directly to the amygdala and the hippocampus, the brain's emotional core and its memory center. Simultaneously, there is no translation layer, no processing delay. The smell of a person goes directly into the structure that decides whether something is safe. What this means is that the first hours of holding are not just bonding in a soft metaphorical sense. They are a biological imprinting event. The smell of the parent's skin, encoded in the first hours of skin-to-skin contact, becomes the infant's first and most durable definition of what safe smells like. And that definition, researchers have found, influences physiological stress responses for years. Babies who received extended skin-to-skin contact in the first hours and days showed measurably lower cortisol responses to stressful stimuli at age 10 compared to those who were separated early. A 10-year cortisol difference, traceable to the first afternoon. Moment 3. The rhythm of your body was the first language I ever learned. Long before a baby can see clearly, long before they can reach or grasp or respond with anything that looks like communication, they can feel movement. The vestibular system, the part of the inner ear that detects motion, gravity, and spatial orientation, is the earliest sensory system to reach full functional maturity. It is online before birth, and for 9 months it received a continuous, uninterrupted feed of data: the rhythm of a heartbeat, the sway of walking, the specific cadence of the body they lived inside. Researcher Ruth Feldman at Bar Ilan University in Israel spent years studying what she called biological synchrony, the way a caregiver's body rhythm entrains an infant's body rhythm during holding and movement. What she found was that the synchrony was not just soothing in the moment, it was calibrating. The infant's nervous system was using the caregiver's rhythm as a reference signal, a baseline from which to measure its own internal state. A rocking motion at roughly 60 oscillations per minute close to the resting heartbeat produced the fastest and most consistent calming responses in infants across every culture Feldman studied. Not because babies are trained to find it comforting, because they spent 9 months entrained to exactly that rhythm, and their nervous system recognizes it as the sound of everything being okay. But here is the part that reaches further than infant soothing. Feldman's longitudinal work, tracking children from birth through early childhood, found that the quality of physiological synchrony between parent and child in the first months of life predicted the child's capacity for emotional self-regulation at age 3. The child's ability to calm themselves down years later was in part built from the hundreds of hours of being rhythmically held, rocked, and carried in the first year. That is not metaphor, it is neurology. The nervous system learns to self-regulate partly by having regulation done to it, again and again, through the body, through motion, through the rhythm of another person who is already calm. Every time you have walked a crying baby around a dark room at 2 in the morning, swaying in that instinctive way that every parent seems to find without being taught, you have been teaching their nervous system something it will carry forward for decades. Not as a memory they can describe, as a capacity they will rely on for the rest of their life. Moment 4. The moment you didn't just see what I felt. You felt it with me. This is the one that Daniel Stern spent most of his career trying to name precisely, because the ordinary word for it is not quite right. Most people, when they think about a parent responding to a baby's emotion, think of mirroring. The baby laughs, the parent laughs. The baby looks excited, the parent looks excited. And mirroring matters. But Stern identified something that goes beyond mirroring, something rarer and more powerful. Something he called affect attunement. Attunement is not matching what the baby does. It is matching the quality of what the baby feels, the inner shape of it. He gave an example. A 9-month-old reaches excitedly for a toy, making a rhythmic grunting sound as they stretch. The mother responds not by imitating the sound, but by bouncing her whole body in a rhythm that matches the intensity and tempo of the baby's effort. Different modality. The baby looks up, and something in their face registers. Not just, you saw me. Something more specific. You know what this feels like from the inside. Stern found that attunement moments, when they happened consistently, produced a specific developmental outcome he considered essential. The baby learned that their inner states were shareable. That the interior of their experience was not a private, sealed-off place, but something that could cross the space between two people and be recognized. That is the foundation, Stern argued, of every meaningful connection a person will ever have. And the absence of attunement left a specific gap. Children whose caregivers consistently mirrored behavior without matching the underlying emotional quality learned something different. They learned to perform feeling rather than communicate it. They learned that the outside of an emotion was what got noticed, not the inside. And that distinction between performing and genuinely expressing shows up in adult relationships in ways that take years of careful attention to trace back to their origin. A 2019 study at the University of Geneva tracked attunement quality in parent-infant pairs at 6 months and then measured the children's emotional expressiveness and social competence at age 7. The correlation held. Not because attunement is magic, but because it is consistent data. Received again and again, across hundreds of small moments, it builds a single enduring belief. What I feel is real, and it is safe to let someone else see it. Here is what ties these 4 moments together. None of them require anything elaborate. No program, no research degree, no specific technique learned from a book. What they require is presence of a particular kind. Presence that is physical, that is rhythmic, that is listening even when there are no words to hear, that is willing to feel with a baby rather than simply respond to them. The reason these moments last is not that they are dramatic, it is that they are repeated. The voice heard through the womb every single evening. The smell of skin in the first hours of contact. The rhythm of being held across hundreds of restless nights. The small, frequent, easy-to-miss moment when a parent doesn't just react to what their baby does, but recognizes what their baby feels. Your baby will not remember any of this as a story. They will not be able to point to a specific moment and say, that is where it began. But the record is being kept, not in language, in the body, in the nervous system, in the part of the brain that decides, before any conscious thought is possible, whether the world is somewhere safe to feel things in. That record is being written right now. And you are the author of every page. If this changed how you see the ordinary moments you are already having with your baby, subscribe and leave a comment below. I want to know which of these 4 surprised you most.